Okay. Can people confirm that they can see my screen on Zoom?
I can see it.
Thank you, everybody. Well,
It's loading now, but it'll
yeah,
load.
there we are.
Yeah,
There.
there.
I'll minimize here. Thank you. Yep. All right. So we are going to go ahead and get started here. Thank you, everybody, for coming to the September Our Revolution meeting. Got a small crowd in person, a small crowd on Zoom, but it all adds up. And so thank you, everybody. And regardless of the audience, this is being recorded and will be posted publicly, and the information will still very much be useful. And so we're going to go through ground rules, do introductions for new people, go over our steering committee and our committees and different ways to get involved with Our Revolution, things that the organization needs help with. Treasurer's report update, updates from what the group has been up to, what our committees have been up to, especially the Palestinian Solidarity Committee, the Brent Stabilization and Tenant Effort Committee, and the Columbia Association Committee. And then, of course, the main event of the night, the Know Your Rights training by the Maryland ACLU. And so without any further ado, you want to introduce the ground rules, Kat?
You want me to do that? Stay on mute if not talking. Raise your hand if you'd like to say something during the general business portion of the meeting. For Q&A portion, keep questions to 1 minute or less. We will cut you off if you don't nicely, and be respectful.
Thank you, Kat. And yeah, so we since it is a smaller audience, I think we do have time for introductions today. If we want to start with maybe our Zoom audience here. Trying to okay, here we are. Yeah, if Alex, maybe if you want to introduce yourself, who you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll introduce myself. So my name is Alex. My pronouns are he, him, they, them. I live in Ellicott City, and I heard about this mostly because yesterday I was just talking, and I got some information about it through the Signal chat. So yeah, I wanted to join.
Awesome. Thank you. Looks like Ruth, if you want to introduce yourself as well. Maybe you're not at the mic right now. That's okay.
Ruth Alice White. I lived in Columbia many years, and I've been a part of this on the periphery for a while.
Got it. Well, thank you, Ruth. And we will be discussing an environmental issue tonight. So maybe you knew about that and that's why you're on, maybe not, but good coincidence if not. But thank you, Ruth. And we just had Carla, if you would like to introduce yourself. Real quick.
Hi, my name's Carla Tevelo. I'm here to listen to about the rights that I have. Is that a good introduction?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. It is a know your rights and learn about your rights. So yes, thank you, Carla. And we do have another person who I wanted to introduce themselves, but they stepped out of the room right now. And so if they come back, we can have them introduce themselves. But in the meantime, we can move on. But yeah, real quick, Kat and I, co-chairs, Vice Chair Ying, Francis Treasurer, Secretary Robert, Week is a at-large member, and we've got a few other at-large members not here. But we also have a vacancy on the steering committee if anybody is interested, especially could use some help with our social media help promote the meetings a little bit more in advance, for example. Want to put that call to action out there. In terms of, what, different ways that people can get involved with our revolution, like between the monthly meetings. We have different committees or work groups that people can get involved with. We have, the Columbia Association, Watch Committee, which Kat is, taking lead on, Palestinian, Solidarity, Committee, which, Malik has been taking lead on, tenant association, tenant organization and rent stabilization efforts, which I've been leading on. We've been engaged with different local union fights, anti-Moms for Liberty and other anti-fascist fights. The most recent one is we've gotten involved with a fight to stop a company called WR Grace from trying to burn plastic in Columbia, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But other committees that people can be involved with if they have interest, County Legislation Tracking Committee, Board of Education Committee, which you might have an update on next month, State Legislation and Issues, Electoral, Community Visibility, Direct Service, and Social Events. And so people have interest in any or all of those, want to get more involved. Kat, if you could maybe share the Google form link in the Zoom chat, but thank you. Yeah, in terms of what specifically,
Click on it.
in terms of what specifically, sorry, it's sharing again. Yeah, in terms of what specifically we could use help with, definitely our social media, as I said earlier. Maybe if anybody has website design skills, we could use a website. And then, tabling at public events so that people know that our group exists and that they can get involved. And then, helping onboarding new people who want to become members. And also helping plan monthly social events, which we do have one later this month, which we'll talk about. And then join the committee. And so in terms of our bank account, are there any updates from last month, Francis? Or are we still at the
Yeah,
same
so
spot?
no real change, and yeah, I need to make a.
The three of us will coordinate to open up an official political organization bank account, so personal account. But thank you, Francis. So yeah, we're sitting pretty at 1619, and then also basically standing off from the state organization to get funds from them when needed. But so yeah. And then in terms of what we have been up to, in terms of what we've been up to. So we did at our June meeting a town hall in the Lakefront Library, developer handout boondoggle to try to tear down the perfectly good Central Branch Library, replace it with $140 million plus one. Robert's been drafting a response piece, which we should be getting out relatively soon, kind of debunking a lot of the recent, propaganda pushes, I would say, trying to dupe the people of Howard County in support of this thing, which we've seen through in the past. Of course, the Office of Inspector General, that's still going to be up for the voters to pass a charter amendment in 2024. We'll continue to be in support of that. Last month, myself, Malik, and some others testified at the Howard County Board of Education on censorship in the school system, specifically on the issue of Palestine, which I'm sure Malik might touch on more in his report. And also that was, part of why we decided to do the Know Your Rights training tonight. And then we also, as I mentioned earlier, have gotten involved in a new fight to combat this plastic, this chemical recycling plant that a company called WR Grace is trying to do in Columbia. And on that front, want to give people a little bit of information about that fight. Ying has been involved with that as well. I think were you just on their steering committee call? Yes. And so Ying is gonna be kind of taking lead on this issue for, on behalf of our Rev, working with, the community members, who are already engaged on this, who, live right in that area. I know Carla, and others have also been engaged on this, but basically, yeah, for people who don't know, WR Grace, it's an international corporation, but it's headquartered in Colombia. And they filed recently for a permit, for a quote unquote plastics, recycling facility. And what that entails, that Orwellian term of plastics recycling, it's not as, rosy as that term implies. I'm not a scientist, so I'm not gonna go too in depth on the process, but, essentially the claim is that the process is gonna involve burning plastics, to recycle it into fuel. And community members are, of course, worried that burning plastic, is gonna release, forever chemicals and other harmful things into the air that they and their families will breathe, and then, cause issues to their health and whatnot. And so WR Grace, of course, is saying everything's fine, everything's fine. I really wish Dara, was in here for this because she was involved with the fight against the stream restoration projects, which use similar, misleading claims to try to dupe community members into thinking that these things are gonna be, safe and okay. Yeah, so WR Grace is claiming everything's gonna be fine, but they have a really bad track record. They poisoned entire communities in, Massachusetts, in, Montana. There's actually a John Travolta movie, made in the 1990s about, the poisoning in Massachusetts that this company WR Grace did. And so, lawsuits are still being settled, even though this is decades old. And so because WR Grace has this bad track record of making misleading claims, doing things that are not good, not being a corporate neighbor, poisoning communities. Of course, community members in Howard County are very skeptical when WR Grace says this is, everything's gonna be okay. The community that WR Grace is gonna do this right next to, Cedar Creek, it's on land that used to be owned by WR Grace. They've had it since the 50s, and they only sold it in like 2016, and developed to a developer who then developed the homes. And now WR Grace is applying to this controversial, air quality, test. And so, the fear is that WR Grace knew that they were gonna apply for this controversial environmental, permit, and that nobody would ever want to live next to them if that had already existed. So they tried to sell the land real quick, develop it right away. So that way it'd be too late for community members to, not purchase the home once they've already done so. And now this project is being trying to put. So, a group, Stop WR Grace, has risen up, against this, community members from the Cedar Creek community right next to it, and also River Hill. And they had a rally this past Friday. It got a lot of news coverage. The Maryland Department of Environment had a public comment period, to submit public comments on this project, which ended on August 29th. And our Revolution, Howard County, was able to get a comment in just in time. And now it's being, the zoning is being investigated by the Department of Planning and Zoning. And so, again, this is just the beginning. This is an ongoing fight. Our Revolution is, helping with the community members, and we hope to continue doing so, as it goes through DTZ. And Ying is gonna keep us apprised on that. Ying, I don't know if there's anything else you want to share based on the steering committee call or anything else. I know you went to, both Kat and you both went to the rally. I don't know.
Yeah, I was there, yeah, when they were walking up the street, yeah. And in fact, it was interesting because there was an employee of WR Grace talking to many of the people there, and he seemed upset about what was going to happen, because I think he might have lived in the neighborhood. So that was interesting.
Yeah, even when their own employees are not happy about it, that's never a good sign. Yeah, Ying, I don't know if there's anything.
I had to get off the call to come here, but the steering committee was talking about what the next steps are. there are some things that they have to put together, and then I could update next month, because right now it's not really anything all fully cooked yet. And then the second half of their meeting on Monday, is actually have community members who are interested in the project. We have a lot of the Cedar Creek residents joining in, just to voice their concern, but yeah, I think for us right now, getting the word out would be the key to this is happening.
Absolutely, and thank you, Ying, for stepping up and helping them. It's a lot of good, intelligent people involved, but a lot of them don't have community organizing experience. So I feel like that's kind of where our group can step in, and they've appreciated the help that we've given them so far. And real quick, with our new guest who is now re-entered, we just finished talking about the WR Grace plastics thing. I don't know if there's any comment you wanted to add before we move on to the next thing.
No, just thank you very much for concentrating on it.
Yes, thank you, Dara. Yes, another strong environmentalist there. But okay, cool. So I will throw it over to Malik to present on the Palestinian International Solidarity. Yep.
Hi, guys. Thank you, Jay, for that wonderful presentation so far. So we had a few events in August, starting with the August 15th Zionism 101 political teaching. And we also had the August 22nd Board of Education testimonies, which Jay mentioned previously. So for some context, at the local Howard County Board of Ed, they allow you to testify at either 4 p.m. or 7 p.m. traditionally on the day of, and we managed to get around 8 of our community members to sign up for testimonies. And we teamed up with the ACLU, with Maryland Care, and we spoke about the ongoing discrimination that Howard County High School's kids have been facing. As an example, we've had a number of walkouts at these high schools. The faculty told students they were not allowed to say certain words, such as Palestine, Gaza, ceasefire, and claimed that these words were anti-Semitic. So to push back against this narrative and to fight for the rights that our students have to, express their protests and whatnot, we teamed up with CARE and ACLU to testify and share our point of view on the matter. We also have been having ongoing bi-weekly vigils around Howard County for Palestinian Solidarity. Members of our community show up with signs on road, and we just try to raise awareness. With all that being said, here's here's some pictures of the events that we took part in. On the left, you can see the Board of Education press conference we have before going in to testify. And on the right, you'll see the Gaza Fights for Freedom screen, which happened, by the way, yesterday, in case you missed it. So along with that, some upcoming events that we have is the September 15th bi-weekly vigil. We should get an email via Howard County for Free Palestine if you have not signed up. If not, feel free to visit our Instagram, where we will share more information about that and the other upcoming events. The other events that we have are the September 8th. Well, the other events that we had on the September 28th Day of Healing event, which is an event where we are going to come together at the house of a community member. We're going to spend time together in solidarity with one another. And we are also going to be having a October 6th rally and march, which is coming up, just to honor the lives that have been lost in this ongoing genocide so far, and to continue to raise awareness about the fact that this genocide not only did it not start on October 7th, it's also ongoing as we speak. And with that being said, I am going to pass the microphone over.
So I will make this quick because there's not too much to update people on, and we just did our last month meeting related to the tenant organizing efforts. But basically, as people know, we are in the midst of organizing the first ever tenant organization or tenant union in Howard County at Columbia Point and Oakland Mills. We did a panel discussion on that last month, and I'm happy to announce that the tenants at Columbia Point now officially have enough petition signatures to become an official tenant union. You have to get at least 30% signatures from at least 30% of occupied units. We've now surpassed that goal. And so the main thing holding us back at this point from being able to say that they're an official tenant union with the legal protections is they still have to hold elections to vote on, tenant union leadership. And so I believe those tenant union elections are going to be next month, at October, at the October 15th tenant committee meeting. And so hopefully by, maybe by our October meeting, they're an official tenant union. So progress is being made, and then hopefully we can replicate the process at other buildings like at Harper House, like that woman, Belinda Green from last meeting, sounding like she could very clearly use a tenant union where she lived. And so I think that's all for the tenant organizing stuff. Kat, do you want to speak on the CA stuff?
Well, right now we have a new president coming in, and he hasn't said a whole lot, but I will share what's been going on at the Wildlife Village Board. They were recording meetings, but they would not share those meetings with the public after being requested, and now they're denying that they record meetings in emails. Today I attempted to record the meeting, was asked to leave. And so I think basically what they do is they take minutes and they take out all the inappropriate things that they like to say during those meetings, or unprofessional. And so the public does not know what is actually going on. There's been a lot of bullying going on at the meetings. It's really kind of disturbing. And so that's about it. And I will be following up on whether we can get those recordings or whether they have gotten rid of them. I'm not sure. Got it?
Well, thank you, Kat. Thank you for holding them accountable. That's how a lot of this corrupt activities, how they get away with it is they do it, in the dark without anybody knowing that it's happening. And so thank you for, trying to shed some sunlight on that. And hopefully, you'll be in a position where you can really, make some noise come next year after the elections. And yeah, the last thing on here is a quote unquote stream restoration project coming to your neighborhood, really stream and forest destruction project. Check out what happened to residents in Longfellow. Follow Protect Our Streams Columbia on Facebook, and that is Dara from Protect Our Streams if people have any questions or want to know more about what these quote unquote stream restoration projects are. But yes, so yeah, before we get started with the sort of know your rights, training stuff and kind of like the background on that, just a reminder, if people want to become a dues paying member, join our email list, follow us on social media, et cetera, et cetera. You can do all that and more on our link tree at this link or with the QR code there. And so thank you. Some upcoming events. This Thursday, because the tenants at Columbia Point are about to finally officially form a tenant union, the property managers are getting scared and trying to throw any Hail Mary they can to prevent it from happening. So now the Columbia Point Management is hosting their own tenant town hall on Thursday, probably trying to convince the tenants like, oh, you don't need a tenant union. We're listening to you guys. We're taking you seriously now. And so I'm hoping that the tenants, are smarter than that and don't fall for that. But that's this Thursday. I just found out on my way here that Gold has not even announced the location of where that is going to be, but they have announced that they're doing a tenant town hall on Thursday. There's the village board has their next tenant committee meeting this upcoming Tuesday, not tomorrow, but Tuesday after that. There's more Board of Education testimony opportunities. I guess that's this Thursday. If you'd like to testify about the censorship or anything else. Tomorrow there is a Solidarity is the political version of love is the title of the event. It's basically a Palestinian Solidarity event by an anti-Zionist Jewish rabbi speaking from, that perspective, which, lessons from Jewish anti-Zionist organizing. It's going to be at Red Emma's in Baltimore. I would encourage people to check that out, especially if you are interested in, what is the argument for, why should Jewish people, be anti-Zionists and be, critical of what, Israel is doing. And so that's tomorrow. And then the last is we have our monthly social event at the end of the month on Saturday, September 28th, 12 to 4. Stop by anytime. It's we're calling it a day of healing. It's going to be at Anna's house on our steering committee. Maybe if you could share that link in there, please, Kat. Yeah, that's the RSVP link. Oh, it's because you're on Zoom. You got to go on the actual. Yeah, there you go. Yep, cool. There. Thank you. But yes, I hope that will be a good time, but also, a positive day of healing as it's framed. And so real quick, just some background before we transition to the Know Your Rights training, just to give some context on why we wanted to do this Know Your Rights training. And thank you to both Nick and Sebastian from Maryland ACLU for joining us tonight. I'm sorry, we're about 10 minutes behind, but basically, since October 7th, like many, places around the country, students at in the Howard County school system at a lot of different public schools in Howard County tried to plan different pro-Palestine, walkouts, demonstrations, and rallies. And I want to make that clear that this was just Palestinian solidarity. It is not a necessarily Hamas solidarity events. These are just, Palestine, not connected to any sort of, ruling government or anything. But and so Howard County school system does have a policy 90/20 that allows for students to engage in, this sort of activism, student expression. And so, these activities should have been perfectly permissible. But when many students at different high schools in Howard County did try to engage in these constitutional forms of expression, they were censored by the Howard County public school system. This was reported on in the Baltimore Banner. The Maryland ACLU wrote a letter to the school system specifically referencing, censorship that took place at River Hill High School. Words like Palestine, Gaza, and siege were censored. This censorship was, reported at the Howard County Human Rights Commission, who have been, launching a formal investigation into the censorship. According to their May meeting minutes, they spoke to the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion about the, supposed censorship that took place. And the quote, or not a quote, but from the minutes where this report was talked about, the directors of DEI and coordinator of school climate and culture, it said they were interviewed to discuss recent student protests and the balance between free speech and the fear of hate speech The HRC previously received testimony from the public alleging that students, protesters were silenced by administrators. Ms. Jones and Ms. Mitchell stated that students were not silenced, but prohibited from using certain trigger words that historically have been considered anti-Semitic. So they're saying it's not censorship, it's not silencing, we're just not allowing certain words to be said because it's, you know, historically considered anti-Semitic. And when we did a press conference last month with CARE Maryland, ACLU Maryland, Howard County for Free Palestine, Our Revolution, Howard County, which did get news coverage. I think it was Judith Jones from the DEI office came out and spoke to us and was saying that only words that are, anti-Semitic were censored, words like Hitler, and that's just not at all an accurate reflection of what students were trying to say. It was not, nobody was trying to say Hitler at a rally. People were trying to say Palestine, Gaza, and siege at a rally, and these were the words that were censored. And so, community members have been testifying for months about this censorship at the Howard County Board of Education hearings. Still, we have not gotten the response that we've wanted. So at that press conference last month, we called for 3 demands. One of them was a public acknowledgement and apology to the families that have experienced this censorship. Another one was for the school to facilitate a walkout with the groups that were censored and allow them to do their walkout uninhibited as they should have been allowed to do in the first place. And the last demand was having the school put on an official Know Your Rights training, not only for students, but also for teachers, administrators, so that students know what their rights are, what they can and cannot do in school, and when their rights are being violated and what to do about it. And also so that teachers and administrators know what they can and cannot do and when they may be violating the First Amendment rights of students. And so with that context in mind, I'm sorry again to our organizers from the Maryland ACLU, Sebastian and Nick, but I can now finally pass it off to you guys. I know, I think Sebastian, you're saying I might need to give you guys screen share authority here so that you can do the slideshow. And if the audio doesn't work, because maybe the audio has to be coming from me, you also sent it to me so I can screen share it as a last resort. But let me give you okay. Yeah. Participants. Or no. That's not what he means. He means you're gonna have to make them co-host.
Oh, I see. Okay. So it's Sebastian?
Yeah.
Okay.
Make co-host. Yes.
And
Nick, yep.
okay, so now they should be able to do it.
Okay. Nick or Sebastian, if one of you not only so that looks like that's working, but could one of you guys say something? We want to make sure that the audio still projects in the room when you talk.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, great.
Where's yours?
Seb, are you sure I can share it? So you don't have to.
I'm good. I'm good to be your
All
slide
right.
guy.
Okay. Well, okay, so thank you all for having us give this KYR presentation. It was the slides are a little last minute, but the information is in my head. So I'm hopeful that I can like say the words. But and I can't see if I can't really see who's in the room. So if anybody has questions, it doesn't seem like there's a bunch of people there, but so if anybody has questions, just feel free to interrupt me. I prefer the dialogue over like a presentation type thing. So yeah, thank you again for having us. really important issue coming into the new school year. Seems to be, I don't know if folks have seen some of the issues out of College Park, University of Maryland, but it's already started, like the renewed censorship over anything and everything Palestine. But so what I'm gonna really talk about today is kind of the First Amendment and its how it's being, or how the law anyway applies the First Amendment in the context of public primary and secondary schools. So basically K through 12. It's a the First Amendment doctrine is a bit of a mess and is very dependent on like where it is you're talking, speaking, protesting. Um, and so there's like kind of specific circumstances and factual scenarios that come into play with K through 12. So I'm going to focus on that, but if there's other like areas that you all have any questions about, feel free to ask, and if I can answer it, I will. So to start, I'll just say like at the outset, the First Amendment says that people have the constitutional right to free speech, free assembly, freedom of assembly, and that is at its broadest when you're kind of like in the public forum, on like a public sidewalk or something like that. But and the only real place that the First Amendment comes into play is when you're talking about ways in which the government is infringing on that right to speak, as opposed to like some private person entity. If you're in like on private property, the rules are a little bit different. So in so that's like the baseline, and then you have a whole bunch of different exceptions. And one of those exceptions is when you is at school in primary and secondary school, K through 12. And the Supreme Court in Tinker v. Des Moines in 1969 kind of set a very kind of like that baseline standard, saying that you don't shed your constitutional rights at the schoolhouse gate. So students also have free speech rights while they're in school. But since then, it's kind of been that like broad kids don't shed their constitutional right at the schoolhouse gate. That kind of baseline doctrine has kind of been rolled back little by little, with more and more exceptions. Let me see in the chat. I have a question about people leafleting their neighborhoods about WR Grace plan to burn plastics. Is this protected? Yes. Yes, that is, as long as you're in a public place, that is protected free speech. So that would be like you're in your regular, that's just traditional First Amendment protection, free speech. So yes, you have that right to leaflet. Okay, so even though students have free speech rights, their schools and courts have kind of found that schools do still have a significant role to play in protecting students, which looks like and schools are government, so First Amendment here applies in the public school setting. So in this context, there are instances where schools and school administrators can regulate the speech of students who go there. Next slide. That being said,
I think we did have
Yes.
one question real quick. Yeah,
Sure.
About the old schools have regulating speech, was that based on some other court cases? Where, how's it spelled out? this is pretty vague. Schools have a significant role to play in protecting students, which can regulate their speech. That's a pretty broad sentence.
Were you able
Yes.
to hear that?
Define.
I think so. Saying that the second sentence here is very broad, that what is the significant role that they play and how does that come in, and if what the case law is, I think, around it.
Yeah,
Yes.
that essentially, yeah.
Okay, so it's this what all of the kind of exceptions to student free speech, like what it really boils down to is the idea that schools, because they're a school and because you're um the people in their care are minors because they're kids, that there's some level of oversight that schools have to have over the students there. They can't just let them say anything and everything that they want. And that's basically what, and then it depends on like the circumstances, obviously, but the essentially this kind of broad statement that they've got a significant role to play is really what the courts are boiling down to, is like this idea that schools are kind of taking care of the kids in their like who go there, and so they have at least some role in kind of regulating the student's speech. I don't know if that it might become more clear as I go on when I talk about specific examples and how things work in different circumstances and what people say. But I don't know if that helps for now.
Yep, thank you.
Okay. So that being said, what the school can't do is discriminate against, they can't engage in viewpoint discrimination, and they can't engage in content discrimination, which are two very similar but slightly different concepts. Viewpoint discrimination being a discrimination based on a particular viewpoint, content discrimination being discrimination on like the content. So if we're looking at Palestine, for example, it would be like, so viewpoint discrimination would be like allowing uh, pro-Israel protests while not allowing pro-Palestinian protests, whereas content discrimination would be like saying no one can talk at all about what's happening in Israel and Palestine. Both are different forms of discrimination, but and they kind of overlap, but are separate types, and neither are allowed. Yes, so you have the right to speak out. You can hand out flyers and petitions. The main kind of standard under Tinker, which was that first case that I talked about, is that you can't, students can't disrupt the operation of school and essentially violate the rights of others. So if, for instance, yeah, I mean, I guess so that's kind of the standard. There's a little bit more to it, like the school has to be able to show that there's been a history of disruption based, and so that they're like kind of predicting that a disruption will happen again. So I'm trying to think of like a case. So one case that came out in, I believe, either North or South Carolina. There was a school where there were neo-Nazi and KKK related like things that were displayed on shirts and hats and things like that were banned from the school. The student and her parents sued the school, and the court said that because there was like a long history of discrimination that occurred in that school, they had gone through segregation, they had um, there were all sorts of like violent incidents relating to racist symbols and anti-Black violence that happened at the schools, that the student who was like wearing like Old Glory kind of Confederate things on their shirts, that was allowed to be censored by the school. So there has to be kind of like this history of disruption, and would allow the school to like kind of forecast in the future, well, if the student were to wear this, then yes, they cannot wear that.
Nick, we do have one question in the audience. Yes.
Yes.
When was that court case decided? Was it pre-2016 or post-2016?
I believe it was in 2017, but I need to look it up again. It was in the 20 teens. Okay, so yeah, you can go to the next slide, Seb. Yes, so what counts as disruptive kind of varies by context. I think the key thing here is that a school, yes, cannot like if the school is simply disagreeing with your position, or if it's based on like it's too political or something like that, that is not enough to say that it'll be disruptive. Which is exactly the reasoning that River Hill gave to the students, to prevent them from being able to say words like Palestine, Gaza, and siege, or apartheid even, was that the reason for not being allowed to say those things was because it's political. Things, just because it's political doesn't mean that they can't say it, doesn't mean that it isn't disruptive or that it will be disruptive. And there really is no history for Howard County Public Schools to point to say that if they said those things, it would cause a massive disruption in the school. So that is kind of an example there. But yes, political speech is protected speech, and just because the school thinks it will be disruptive, or I guess if they disagree with it, or if they think it's too political, that's just not good enough to censor them. So this is this goes kind of toward the rights of students to be able to wear specific kinds of clothing. So dress codes, for instance, schools are allowed to have as long as they're content neutral, and they're not discriminating against any particular group. So as long as they're saying like, oh, well, you can't talk about, so a content neutral dress code policy would look like just saying like, this is the uniform. And if it was to say something like, you can't display, I don't know, if you can't display the Palestinian flag, that would obviously be not content neutral, and would violate the Constitution. So as long as it is content neutral, schools are allowed to have dress codes, because that kind of goes toward what I was saying in the beginning, where like it kind of goes toward what the school and what courts have found, that like schools have like a they're taking care of your kids for a lot of the day, and they do have a say in things like that. So and then these are other examples. Pro NRA hats, obviously. I mean, like that would be content based discrimination if there was like something like that prohibited. Yes, so a lot of the time school officials try to justify censorship by saying it's disruptive, when really it's about the content of the message. This is like exactly what happened in Howard County Public Schools. They thought it was too political. They told the students it was too political. I think also because they got a lot of messages from parents saying that X, Y, and Z was anti-Semitic, so they can't say this or do this or wear this. And that is again not enough to justify censorship. And yes, even like concerns about other students' reactions to a political message still doesn't justify the censorship. So this slide I threw in there because these 3 or 4 examples, the first one being Tinker, but the other 3 examples came from other Supreme Court cases that have to do with very specific circumstances, but instances where a school might be able to regulate a student's speech if the speech is lewd or indecent, if they're like, this one came from a case about a student who was I think making sexual innuendo jokes during a school speech, who was later punished, and the Supreme Court thought that in school, a school is allowed to punish a student if they make lewd or indecent comments, so they don't have that First Amendment protection. Again, promoting illegal behavior. This one came from the Supreme Court case about bong hits for Jesus. There was a protest where a student had a sign that said bong hits for Jesus, and the student was later punished for that. And the Supreme Court said that yes, schools can at school sponsored events, the things that are promoting illegal behavior, like at the time, I guess, well, I guess still federally, but smoking marijuana is illegal. So, and they don't want to, and that guy kind of goes it's contrary to like the school's interests in promoting like it's like a drug-free school zone, blah blah blah, stuff like that. So can't promote illegal behavior in school. And then the last one, bearing the imprimatur of the school. This means that it is as if the school itself is speaking. So in those instances, a school can regulate the speech. That case was about a school newspaper. So a student journalist had written an article, and the school kind of edited it and made changes to it, and so the student didn't like that, obviously. And the court said that a school newspaper bears the imprimatur of the school, which means then that it's as if the school itself is speaking, so they can kind of regulate the student's speech in that instance. So yes, that raises those are like somewhat broad categories that kind of come into play in different scenarios. The very last one came into play with student walkouts most recently. So hang on, I haven't been checking the chat. Sorry, folks, for those who've been asking questions. Does the Espionage Act also affect handing out leaflets and releasing information? I do not know the answer to that question. I would think not.
I appreciate
maybe.
it. I appreciate it. The Espionage Act applied. It was released during World War I, and people were arrested for handing out anti-war leaflets. So that's why I was wondering. Thank you.
Okay. And then Seb asked, where does hate speech fit in? So hate speech is tricky, but I would say that it fits into the first category of disrupting and infringing on the rights of others, where, I mean, harassment and hate speech are generally in school policies as things that students cannot say. I think generally like facially, which means like on the law itself, I think school policies that say you can't do hate speech, you can't harass kids, those are like facially constitutional. If it might depend in practice, in how things are defined as hate speech. I think that's a bigger question now, maybe than it has been in the past, or at least so for school administrators. But I think that's kind of where it fits in the First Amendment doctrine, is in that first category. Bearing so walkouts could potentially bear the imprimatur of the school. There was some we addressed this in our letter to Howard County Public Schools, that and if for instance a walkout was to bear the imprimatur of the school, then that would allow the school to regulate the speech more than they would otherwise. Obviously, they still can't do like viewpoint discrimination or content discrimination, but if it bears the imprimatur of the school, then things that the school that River Hill had censored would probably have been allowed. So like they could prevent the students from saying Palestine or Gaza. But we don't think, and we don't believe the school system thinks either, that school and student walkouts bear the imprimatur of the school. So they can't use that as a justification to regulate the speech. But that is a separate, somewhat complicated legal question.
Could I just, Nick, could I just add one thing real quick?
Yeah.
Just, especially Jake, with those demands that HOCO for Palestine has come up with, those 3 demands you named, including the one around basically not inhibiting a walkout. I know the original language that y'all were considering was about the idea of like sponsorship of a walkout. And I think this, when I had learned about this too from Nick, I think that might give kind of additional reason to avoid that and to stick with y'all's demand in the form it's in, of just uninhibiting the walkout as opposed to sponsoring. Because in sponsoring, I think, Nick, that would mean it would come with additional regulations, because it would be officially kind of bearing this imprimatur of the school. And so I think there's reason there, Jake, to stick with the demand y'all have to limit the additional regulations, just as a kind of example.
Good to know. Thank you. And I'm a dummy who didn't know what the word imprimatur meant. So does that mean bearing the imprimatur of the school? That would mean anything that like implies that the school also agrees with the content of the speech.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it makes it look as if the school itself is speaking.
Oh, yes. Thank you. And good point, Sebastian. And we do have one other question in the audience. Yeah, Dan.
More of a point of clarification. So, and I'm on the question of a walkout being possible. So any student can organize a walkout that just may be punished. So is the goal here to ensure that the punishment for the student doesn't happen as part of this, and that's considered censorship, or is that a separate issue?
That's a great question. So yes, I think walkouts are generally considered civil disobedience, so they are punishable. In Howard County Public Schools policy, they seem to explicitly allow walkouts. And the way that it's worked in practice also has been that they allow walkouts. So if a school is allowing a walkout to happen, they can't treat the people who participate in that walkout like they can't punish them. They have to like apply the rule consistently. So, and what usually happens, I think, is that they get either if they like miss the whole day, then it's like a unexcused absence. but I think the way that it works in Howard County Public Schools is that it's usually happening during non-instructional time, which actually helps helps with that legal analysis with bearing the imprimatur of the school, because if it's happening during non-instructional time, it's hard to say that the school's sponsoring it because it's not part of the school curriculum or anything. So but yeah, so it's usually happening, and all the protests that I'm aware of, I think all happened, or at least last year, happened during non-instructional time. So and I don't think they missed any class or anything like that. So I don't think any of the students are being punished in any way for participating in the walkout. If they were punished, then I think that becomes an issue, because then they're targeting people for participating in a particular protest while they're not doing the same for other walkouts with other subject matters. Like there was a protest about gun violence. I think there was a BLM one. There's generally like pride walkouts, I think, where students are not being punished for those kinds of walkouts. So if a student is punished for walking out in support of Palestine, that becomes viewpoint discrimination.
And I just want to add on that real quick, that it seemed like the school didn't have a problem with the concept of a walkout. It was what they were saying during the walkout, more than just them doing a walkout at all.
Right. In the chat, we've got so our words like genocide, allowed. I can't remember what this was which specific point that was referring to, but if I'm remembering, I think it was about when I was talking about like other words like apartheid, Palestine, ceasefire, all those words.
Yeah.
I think genocide is, yeah, I mean, I don't think genocide was allowed by Howard County either. And I don't know if there's like a specific set of words that are always, I think it's really, I mean, it was really like up to the school administrators in River Hill which words were allowed and which words were not allowed. And that is a problem.
I know of one school, students said they were gonna organize a walkout to, protest against genocide and promote ceasefire. An administrator basically said, let's make this about
Something with this one.
So in a way, that's implicitly saying, we don't want you to say those words, let's use these more whitewashed generic terms, which completely defies the purpose of the walkout, right?
Exactly.
Piece, but that's not what the students were trying to do.
Yes, and I would say that censorship is illegal under the First Amendment.
Yeah, that was a different school from River Hill, so it probably didn't rise to the level of complaining to ACLU, but students, I did hear students who attend that school who were part of the walkout mentioning that, and then actually a staff member said they got an email from this principal saying that we should support the students who are advocating for world peace.
Which school was it? Just out of curiosity.
And that Marriage Ridge.
Marriage Ridge High School.
Marriott Ridge. Okay. Yeah, I hadn't heard about Marriott Ridge. I heard let's see, I heard from Glenell, I heard from Howard, and I heard that the ones in Appleton and Wild Lake were okay. But I hadn't heard anything about Marriott's Ridge, so that's good to know.
I heard there were issues at Long Reach as well.
At Long Reach also?
Yeah.
Okay. That's good to know. This slide. Yeah, this I think we've covered. Yes, so Maryland law, you can't get out of school suspension or expulsion for for an unexcused absence. So yeah, I mean, and the First Amendment prevents like disparate treatment between punishments. Like you can't be more harshly treated for missing class for a walkout than for any other unexcused absence. Keep going, Seb, unless there's questions about that. Yeah, so again, the Tinker v. Des Moines standard about disruption, we at the ACLU think that that's the standard, not the imprimatur of the school standard for school walkouts. And so the Tinker standard of disruption, you can't like substantially disrupt the operation of the school. So like if you're in the course of your walkout, you like bang on all the doors of the other classrooms as you're going out, that would be something that the student could be disciplined for. Because then at that point you're no longer like just participating in the walkout, you're disrupting the school. Next slide. Yeah, so some things just to be aware of. Actually, this is a law in a lot of places, but if you face a suspension of 10 days or more, you have the right to formal process, and actually you have the you can be represented by a lawyer. And that goes also for expulsion. If you're facing expulsion as well, you can also face you can have a lawyer represent you. Yeah. And I think, yeah, this is just if so, I mean, we're not really aware of any lawful basis for arresting a student who peacefully walks out, but yeah, I mean, if that happens, if you're or a student is threatened with arrest or actually arrested, then yes, that's a significant problem. So and then I threw this in there also because it kind of came up in the Howard County Public School First Amendment issues. So there were some social, I think on Instagram, there were some posts about like saying like, I stand in solidarity with Palestine, that the schools at River Hill and I think a few other places instructed the students to take down. So social media is protected, free speech. I think if it gets a little bit tricky when the speech starts to involve other students in school, or if it involves a teacher. I think then it gets into like the infringing on the rights of other students kind of territory. But generally speaking, things that you say on social media or outside of school, off campus speech, that is all protected by the First Amendment. And so there's this like on campus, off campus kind of distinction. So yeah, it kind of like where you're posting things. If you're like on a school computer posting things during school hours, then it becomes on campus speech. If you're out of school, off campus on your phone, just putting something on social media, then it becomes off campus speech and it's protected. So.
And Nick, is it right that in the Howard County case, since this was a club, the Student Muslim Association wasn't bearing the imprimatur, wasn't like, even though it's a school sponsored club, it wasn't technically something that's on behalf of the school. The idea is that they could post what they wanted. Is that right?
Yeah. So this is kind of a somewhat untested area of law. Like we haven't, I don't believe that there have been cases about this. But our position is that the student clubs also, so student clubs and organizations also have First Amendment rights. And so I Stand in Solidarity post on Instagram. That was actually on the River Hill MSA's Instagram. So that kind of brings in some tricky things. Like it talks about like imprimatur of the school. Is that the school speaking? We say no because no one, I mean, to us anyway, any reasonable person who sees River Hill MSA doesn't think that it's River Hill who is adopting this position. It's the group of students at River Hill under the MSA banner who say, I stand in solidarity with Palestine. So it shouldn't bear the imprimatur of the school. And the post, the Instagram post was during non-school hours. It was on somebody's phone. It wasn't on school grounds. So this so the it doesn't raise any of these kinds of exceptions to the free speech protections that the First Amendment affords. At least that's our position. And but again, it hasn't been tested in court. And then for secondary schools, public secondary schools,
We have,
yes.
we have one question there.
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
Did ACLU have any part defending the NCPS teachers? So yeah, in Montgomery County,
Can you answer her question? Oh,
You can,
okay.
you can answer. Sorry, go ahead, Nick. Go ahead. Yeah.
oh, sorry, was somebody gonna ask a question?
Well, no, there was, there's a question in the chat. You can finish answering that, and then we have a question in the room as well, but you can address
Okay.
one.
Okay. Sorry. It's hard to
Yeah.
so the question in the chat, did we have any part defending the MCPS teachers? Somewhat. We were working a lot with CARE about that. We were kind of communicating between organizations about kind of what to do there. We were actually focusing more on the students in MCPS, and because we had heard a lot of like censorship issues, walkout issues, a lot of MSAs who had posted things on social media who were getting censored, but unfortunately none of those students felt comfortable challenging their school. So in the end, we were prepared to send MCPS a letter, but did not because a lot of the student folks didn't feel comfortable. But yes, I mean we were coordinating with CARE.
A lot of coordinated action related advice. What would be the advice if a student is basically told that their speech is disrupted in class and sent to detention, or something that is more individualized?
All right, I had a little bit of trouble hearing your question.
Dare, you're saying if a student is punished for,
If a student is sent to detention or some other individual punishment rather than something more on a group scale or, school-wide.
she's asking what if like an individual student is disciplined rather than like a group of students?
Okay. Yeah, even individual students, I mean they still have First Amendment rights. It extends to groups, but a lot of those big cases are actually individuals. Like Tinker was an individual student who was wearing a Vietnam armband protesting the Vietnam War. So a lot of those cases have to do with individuals. So yeah, if an individual student is disciplined for something they say, then the First Amendment law comes into play.
Yeah, thank you, Nick.
Sure. Yeah, so I also wanted to put this in there, right to form organizations. So there's various laws, and it's not just the Equal Access Act, but one of the laws that in public secondary school, you have to give equal access to different extracurricular school clubs. If you allow school clubs to receive funding, like one group, you can't deny it to another group. You have to give equal access for students to be able to form their own groups and get all the benefits that come with that. And there's also First Amendment case law about this as well. You can't discriminate against particular groups by giving money to one group, but then denying it to another group. You have to allow all groups equal access, if that makes sense. And then other things that kind of come into play, so there's anti-discrimination laws as well. And I believe the CARE cases in Montgomery County against MCPS included a Title VI claim. But these are anti-discrimination laws, Title VI and Title IX. Title VI is about discriminating against on the basis of race, color, or national origin. Title IX on the basis of sex, which is the usual vehicle for challenging like anti-LGBTQ plus discrimination. But yeah, Title VI kind of comes into play here, or it can definitely, when you're talking about viewpoint discrimination, or if like it's only anti-Palestinian speech that is being censored, that could be discriminatory on the basis of race, color, or national origin. So that kind of brings in additional factors to think about when looking at these kinds of issues. And I think that's it that I have. So if folks have any other questions, I'm happy to do my best answering.
That was very informative. Okay, there we go. Yeah, it's very informative, Nick. I can't see my computer, but I trust you all can still see me. Yeah, I do have a question. So let's say that a student, feels that their rights have been violated and they want to pursue action about that. What is like the form of relief there? Like, could they get money for having their rights violated? Is it just like a declaratory relief thing? The court says the school violated the rights and here's what the rights are going forward.
That's a great question. Yeah, so the way that it usually works is the latter, although it has to do, it's usually, so the kind of declaration that whatever happened was illegal. Usually what ends up happening is you seek what's called nominal damages, and nominal damages are usually $1. But that's only to kind of bring the case essentially, and for the court to find that what they did, what the government, school, whoever the governmental entity is, what they did was illegal. But yeah, it's usually like seeking nominal damages.
Got it. And then it would also be just bad publicity for the school system, and hopefully that would disincentivize them from doing that again in the future.
Right. And the other thing about I mean, it isn't the case that there's like no money involved. In these like civil rights cases, there's a as part of like in our civil rights laws, there's a section that allows the attorneys who bring the case to win attorney's fees. So if it's a really hard fought case, the attorney's fees could be in like the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So even if like and I think, I don't agree, but I think the reason why it goes that way, where the individual who suffered the First Amendment harm is only getting like $1 versus the attorneys who bring the case. Is that at least the reason that I think the courts are saying that is like they don't know how to quantify the harm in dollar amount, but are still kind of having that attorney fee provision in place. I mean, having the attorney fee provision in place is generally a good thing, actually, because these cases are really complicated, and if there's no financial incentive for an attorney to take it, then no one gets represented, and then nobody wins, and nobody's rights get protected. So that part is generally a good thing. But in the individual cases, having $1 is kind of a slap in the face, to be honest, given the harm experienced, especially in these cases. I mean, I feel like the harm is insane. But in any event, yes, that's usually the mechanism is nominal damages.
Thank you. I also have one more question. Have you heard of a concept called the heckler's veto before? And for those who do not, or maybe you could explain it like better than I could.
Yeah, so a heckler's veto is like essentially so a heckler being like somebody who disagrees with your position and is kind of like, I guess, essentially harassing you and protesting, but in because of that, the government then shuts down the entire thing. So like a heckler is therefore like vetoing your ability to even protest at all. And yeah, and hecklers' vetoes are not my I don't really know very much about hecklers' vetoes in the like legal doctrine, so I don't want to like give people the wrong information. But in a nutshell, that's what a heckler's veto is.
Yeah, the reason I asked is because it seems like that's kind of like the main tool that is weaponized to like silence people from doing anything on this issue. Is they just raise a big stink about it, say that it's hateful, say that it's putting them at harm or them at risk, and then the school uses that as like an excuse to like justify shutting it down. And so yeah, I feel like that's what needs to really be overcome.
Right. And I guess like in that it's like, and this comes up or could come up. I don't know if it came up in the Howard County censorship issue, the like school censorship stuff, but I think a example of a heckler's veto would be if the school system thought that in response to the Palestinian protesters that a group of like Zionist counter protesters then like went and like disrupted the school. Like there was that fear that would happen, and for that reason they shut down the Palestinian protests. That would be a heckler's veto. Like the Zionist counter protesters would be the heckler, vetoing the ability of the pro-Palestinian protesters to protest, if that makes sense.
By the heckler's veto makes it unconstitutional, or how does that come into play with students' rights protest?
Yeah, so I don't believe that would be a legally justifiable reason to prevent the Palestinian protesters from protesting. The fear of a counter protester disrupting the school. But
yeah,
again, my I'm wading into territory that I don't know a lot of. So
think a lot of stuff is just kind of vague, and that's why it's difficult, because it's up to the judgment of whoever the judge is and what they determine is,
yeah,
viable.
yeah. Usually the line of thinking is that the solution is more speech as opposed to prohibiting one side's speech, is to just allow more speech.
But no, well, thank you, Nick and Sebastian. I don't know if did anybody else either on Zoom or in person have any other questions? I'm not seeing any. But yes, no, thank you so much for, not only doing this know your rights training, but also, consistently advocating for the Howard County students who have had their First Amendment rights violated. You guys, as ACLU Maryland, are a powerful organization with a lot of influence, and so thank you for using it to uplift those students' stories who probably would have a hard time getting it out there otherwise. And I also understand, yes, you all do know your rights trainings from time to time, but this specific topic about censorship in schools, especially on the issue of Palestine, is you're getting more and more requests about it. And so did you all have anything else, any future trainings that you wanted to promote?
I think that's a sub question.
Sorry. Yeah.
I don't know. It might we definitely do, because we've been getting, obviously seeing this all over the state, high schools, but then also, as Nick was saying, on obviously college campuses, and already have seen it at the beginning of the school year. So we're thinking of doing a statewide virtual presentation on this that Nick's going to build out. And and we haven't set the date, but to have it be as relevant as possible for students get back to school, we're hoping in the next few weeks. So I think end of September, early October is the plan. So we'll let y'all know for sure.
Got it. Well, thank you. Yeah, we'll definitely be on the lookout for that, and promote that to our membership as well. But yeah, thank you to our presenters from the Maryland ACLU. Thank you to the audience members who came tonight, both in person and virtually. Our next meeting is Monday, October 14th at 7 p.m. at a library to be determined. But yeah, unless there are any last comments, questions, concerns, are we okay to adjourn the meeting? Someone want to make a motion to adjourn?
Make
Yeah.
a motion to adjourn.
Okay,
Second.
Francis, second. All in favor to
Aye.
adjourn the meeting, say aye. All opposed, nay. Got it. Well, thank you, everybody. Have a good night. See you next month.